All right, we are here. What is going on, Auburn family? This is your man, Ike Jones, in the place. This is the War Report, man. This is the first time we're doing this War Report broadcasting live to you guys. My man Mike G over here. I got my man B Will, and I got my man Caesar in the building, man. We're going to be here talking Auburn football with you guys every week, every opportunity we can. We're just going to be sitting down talking Auburn football. Before we get too deep into this, I do want to let you guys know that you can follow us on pretty much all social media platforms, but specifically Twitter and Instagram at The War Report. The War Report. You can follow us there. It's right there on the screen. But you can also follow each of our individual handles here. If B Will let you in, he might not like you, so he might not let you follow him. But that's a whole other story. Anyway, we're gonna get straight.
Privacy, man. I need my privacy.
I feel you, man. We're gonna get straight into the meat of this, man. It was a great college football weekend. A lot of wonderful things happening. I'm gonna let my man Mike G touch it off about what we got going on in the college football weekend. Mike, talk to the people.
Big weekend in college football, right? It's been a while since we've had four undefeated ranked teams playing each other in the same weekend. The big one this weekend was Alabama LSU, but probably one of the more impactful ones was Penn State Minnesota. Getting into Penn State Minnesota, I want to start with this one, man. We had a good game. Minnesota shocked a lot of people. I think there was a lot of questions about whether they were for real or not. I think we found out that they were. I was really impressed by their quarterback and what they were able to do to statistically what is a top 10 defense with playing Penn State. Penn State's been playing out of their minds. They've looked good. They've got multiple draft prospects on their team. But Minnesota really showed us something. And why that matters is, they came out in these initial rankings as a number 4. The committee gave them a lot of respect. And they had a game to prove why they belonged there. And it didn't pan out for them. They looked vulnerable on defense. Minnesota had a surprise prospect this weekend and a receiver that just absolutely shredded them up. It was a great. I mean, this guy Rashad Bateman went for 203 and a touchdown against one of the best defenses in the country. So, or at least what we thought was one of the best defenses in the country. So, got a lot of Penn State fans in my immediate circles. There was not a lot of "We Are" being chanted this weekend. It was a sad weekend for them. My phone was blowing up. Yeah, we are not going to get in, right? But for the most part, I felt like we saw the picture started to clear up a little bit. I mean, we went in with, 8 undefeated teams. This game was the 12 o'clock game, so it was the first to kind of decide how we were going to dwindle that down. Penn State, I thought they had a tough road. They don't have a whole lot more chances to actually prove themselves. The rest of the Big Ten kind of fell off a little bit. They still have Ohio State on the schedule, but Ohio State hasn't really played anybody, so we'll see where that goes when we see that matchup. So they'll either jump right back in the conversation or be out of it completely, in a couple weeks. So yeah. Penn State, Minnesota was big. What did you guys think?
No, I agree that. So I actually am probably in the minority of people who thought Minnesota was going to win this game. Just because I did not believe in Penn State's offense. Their defense had looked great. I didn't believe in their offense. And I knew Minnesota had a really decent defense. But what I did not expect to see was Minnesota do this well offensively against Penn State. Not that they performed poorly, and that's a team that's gotten better over the year. But they, at the beginning of the season, they were a mess. They were barely winning games against teams that they should, to be an undefeated team ranked in the top 10 blowout. And they just weren't doing that. But they have gotten progressively better throughout the season. So, but I did think that they were going to win the game. And I just think that they're not getting very much respect, man. We talked about this a little bit earlier before the broadcast, but PJ Fleck has done an awesome job at Minnesota of getting that team ready to play every week. So hats off to them for sure.
Yeah,
You make an interesting point.
About what?
You make an interesting point. Real quick, Caesar. Let me hit on what Isaac said. Right. So what we've been kind of seeing is that stats kind of lie sometimes, right? And I thought there was some very true stats in this game between Penn State and Minnesota. Both quarterbacks threw for Penn State's quarterback threw for 340 yards. Minnesota's quarterback threw for 339. Tanner Morgan did it on 20 throws, and Sean Clifford did it on 43. So the efficiency, kind of like how they ran their offense and how they were able to do it against what we thought were one of the better defenses, it shows up. It showed up in that final score. They had a little bit of extra juice at the end of the game. Came up with some big plays. I was really impressed with Tanner Morgan. Admittedly, I had not taken Minnesota seriously, so this is the first time that I actually gave them a good look this year. And he passed the eye test for me, but I thought he passed the paper test as well too. I mean, statistically, he had a phenomenal game. So 18 for 20 for 339 and 3 TDs. Most teams would take that any day of the week. So they really jumped on the map for me and for a lot of people.
Yeah. What were you gonna say?
What were you gonna say?
No, I was just going to echo Ike's sentiments about PJ Fleck and just the amazing job he's done with Minnesota this year. And to your point, yes, I think forget what team it was, but they barely eked out a win early in the year and have gradually gotten better. And they came into the game ranked 17th and have jumped 10 spots after that win. So they are in the conference that they're in. They have a lot to gain because of who they match up against. So the Penn State game just catapulted them. And if they hold course, they'll be on a collision course with Ohio State in the conference championship. I'm hearing, and that'll put them squarely in. That'll be an elimination game for the Big Ten to see who gets into the playoff from that conference. So it'll be interesting to see if they continue to improve and what they're able to do against Ohio State.
Cool. B. Will, you got anything to add to that?
I mean, it was a big game, and I didn't watch as much of it as I wanted to because I was busy on Saturday. But I don't get quite as hyped up about even some of those matchups that we know are pivotal between people that are in the top 10 and top 15, because we know that by the end of the regular season, so many of these people have to play each other that we're really just waiting for it to shake. With the Alabama LSU game and with the Penn State and Minnesota game, and now it's going to be the Ohio State Penn State game, and like y'all said, it's going to boil down to the West Division of the Big Ten versus the East. So no matter who that was going to be, it was going to be Minnesota versus Penn State or Minnesota versus Ohio State or I am waiting to get down to the nitty gritty. But in the short term, I did not think that Minnesota was going to win that game just because we know that they don't have the horses necessarily. I mean, ranking, the talent that comes in, they've got some since PJ Fleck was there, but not too much. So him winning that game says a lot to him as a coach. I agree with y'all on that. To really kind of rally troops. He was good at Western Michigan though, because I remember doing some small time betting when he was there, and he came through for me a couple times. So that's how I remember his name. So I wasn't too surprised. I was sort of surprised, like I said, the difference in talent, but not too surprised at the outcome because the Big Ten is generally overrated anyway. So anybody could be anybody except for
fired.
That's just facts. I mean, but anybody beating anybody else doesn't really surprise me unless it's Ohio State losing, which them losing, even though we never really made a huge deal of it in years past, they always lose one that they shouldn't have. But honestly, that was a way bigger deal because they got way too much talent to lose to the teams that they've lost to in the last few years. So they're the big dogs in the conference. I'm glad to see them holding serve so far. I expect them to hold serve to the championship game. And even though I expect Minnesota to be there playing them, I expect Ohio State to win it because they just got way better players.
Yeah. All right.
I don't know if I agree. I just think, I'm not sure we know what Ohio State is just yet. I think we passed the eye test for a lot of people.
I know.
I gotta take on that in a little bit. We'll get into that in a little bit when we get into our college football playoff rankings. But let's continue with the week that was, and we'll move over to the other marquee matchup for the weekend.
Oh man, Bama LSU. Listen, this was personal for a lot of us, right?
Yeah, this is back in the home. Yeah,
this is personal. I did some research before the game and saw that down in the old Baton Rouge, they passed some emergency legislation to protect their trees after this one. So hopefully the trees down in Louisiana are okay. They've been known to travel to do things that are not so nice to the forested things. But man, what a great game, right? What a great game. We had I think what we saw, this was something that I said, before the week started. Bama's defense isn't the Bama of old, right? This isn't the Bama defense that we've been used to seeing. They had a lot of injuries at linebacker before the season started, and they've got I'll venture to say that they have the talent, but it's not as developed as we're used to seeing, because that process down there at Alabama has been plug and play, next man up, and through the attrition of time, it seems like for the first time in what's been like 10 years, we're seeing that they don't actually have a next man up just yet. Those guys may be all-time great next year, but right now that's not what they are, evidenced by the fact that they gave up 30-plus points to Arkansas and Ole Miss, and who are currently bottom dwellers, which we'll get to later in the SEC. So, there were some hot takes, fellas, before this one. Colin Cowherd said Saban is the hammer, LSU is the nail, and he was taking Bama big. And I thought to myself, I was like, does he really believe that? Because if they gave up 30 to Ole Miss and Arkansas.
I think a lot of people honestly believe that because it was Bama, they were going to come in here and do what Bama does, quote unquote. But yeah, that's not evidenced by anything that you could have seen on the field this year.
Yeah, I mean, their reputation precedes them. You know what I mean? And so oftentimes they're going to get the benefit of which, again, a point to be made when we talk about the college football playoff.
Right.
They're going to get a lot of love based off of Bama of yesteryear. So
let me say this. Joe Burrow ain't scared. And this man went into Bryant-Denny and went 31 for 39 for 393 and 3 TDs. That's big. That's what Colin Cowherd meant. That's what you should have talked about. Because Joe Burrow, I mean, it's his Heisman to lose at this point.
Yeah,
but they put up a stat during the game about the LSU receivers versus the Bama receivers, and they were almost identical in stats in yards per catch. I mean, it was a crazy stat to look at. I mean, they were one touchdown off from each other. There was talent all over the field on offense in this game. On that first fumble by Tua on the opening drive, he looked a little tentative on that leg, on the ankle, right? Mm-hmm. And, football can be a mental game, extremely at some time. So, when he's running free with that football, I couldn't help but think maybe he was thinking about that ankle just a little bit too much, and that ball got away from him. And then, again, like I said, Joe Burrow wasn't scared. He took that and he drove it right back down the field, nearly 90 yards for a touchdown, and really set the tone for the game. So, Bama, they've got some issues, and I'll be interested to see, again, we'll talk about it later, how, if the committee sees the same issues that we've been seeing, since the season started, right? They've won big. Surprisingly, we play in the same division, but their schedule was extremely weaker than ours. I don't know how that worked out, right? But
it's because of who we play outside of the division.
Well, there you go. And this was the first real test they've had all year, 8-9 games in, and they failed it. I mean, they gave up 46. I said, I told everybody that that LSU would put 40 on a minimum. They did me 6 points better. I thought it could have been a lot worse. I thought Orgeron went into ball control mode in the third quarter, really trying not to put his players in a position to give up momentum in a road environment. And then he found out that he couldn't do that because Tua is still really good. And that don't let the final score fool you guys. They dominated that game. They dominated that game from start to finish. They essentially drove the ball as long as they wanted and as far as they wanted, and they scored what seemed like every time. So I was super impressed with LSU. They proved that they're the number one team in the country, hands
Yeah.
down. Alabama that we're used to in terms of defense, but I will say that that offense in Bama is all time good as well. So even being able to go into their house and outscore them, I thought was just outstanding.
Yeah, I think that we're definitely in a different era right now of Alabama football.
I think too, to your point, when you talk about attrition with guys leaving for the league and graduating and all of that good stuff, don't discount the fact that they've had a lot of coaches leave to go elsewhere as well. There's been a revolving door of coaches taking head coaching jobs elsewhere, and that can kind of catch up with you if you're doing that year after year.
Yeah.
So along with player injuries, I think it's starting to catch up with Bama in some ways, and they just got caught slipping yesterday against a high-powered LSU offense.
I actually saw someone, or I was listening to the radio I was listening to the radio last night driving home, and they were saying that every time in the last 3 years that Nick Saban has been up against a team whose talent is equal to his, he's been beaten pretty handily. And that's something to be said about kind of, number one, he recruits really well, right? Like, so, but if anybody is on the field with him that can coach decently and has equal talent, they're losing that game. And I mean, that last year against Clemson, they got destroyed. This year against LSU, for all intents and purposes, they got destroyed. A couple of years ago against us, when we had equivalent talent on the field with them, they got destroyed. Like, it's when the talent has been equal, they're losing. And that played itself out again this past weekend or yesterday.
Well, I'll take you one further, because I don't even think that it's when the talent is equivalent and there's a decent coach. When we won 2013, we won in 2017. I don't think if you line up our 4 stars, our 5 stars, our 3 stars, so on and so forth, we have never had equivalent talent versus Bama in the Nick Saban era outside of maybe 2007. Like, that may be that last Tuberville hoorah when Nick's first year. That may be the last time we had equivalent talent on the field versus Bama. Other than that, we have not. So it's not that. You're right. His strength is Nick Saban's strength has always been recruiting. He's just gonna put more kings and bishops and knights and queens on the board, and all you got is pawns. So of course, and they call that the greatest coach ever. He is not a great coach. He is a great program builder. He is a great recruiter. But he is not a great coach, because if I give you the same cards that I got and we just have to strategically play the best game we can play, he doesn't win those games. And that is the mark of a great coach to me. If we have equal talent, which is why he didn't do great in the NFL. You're going to get what everybody else gets. You have to evaluate, you have to draft, you have to hope you find a gem in the rough. And he did nothing. He made a terrible choice at QB and went with Dante Culpepper over Drew Brees. And now Drew Brees is going to be a Hall of Famer. And he left. And that's Nick Saban's legacy on the stage where talent is equivalent. So it's not very hard to see. No. I'm talking, Mike. I want to trash Nick Saban. You give me the mic. So as we come back down to, he got back to Alabama, and don't get me wrong. We know what the game is in college. Anybody who's been at a major university for basketball, like a Kentucky or a Duke or somewhere like that, or football, like we are here in the SEC, we know without knowing, but we know what recruiting is and looks like at major universities. I have never seen anything suspect taking place. But I know you talk to your friends who go to different schools in the SEC, and everybody knows. So at a certain point, Nick Saban changed the game in that arena. I'm just going to leave that right there, and everybody can interpret that how they will. He did so well that he was able to stack the 2 deep full of talent that most people only get 2 or 3 of those guys in a cycle. And like Caesar alluded to, now that's thinned out tremendously, not only because other programs have had some success, but the coaching exodus has directly contributed to it. Because if Kirby Smart can go to Georgia, who has resources to recruit as well, and he can say, listen, you're a defensive player, you're a 5-star defensive tackle, linebacker. Look what I did with that talent when we were there. And he's going to say, come over here. And now Nick Saban's not going to get 3 of those guys. He's going to get one of those guys because one of them is going to go to Clemson because Clemson can say, I don't care about Alabama, I just beat them. And Kirby can say, I know how to do that with you and get you to the league because I just did it with a whole bunch of guys. So now they can't stack the deck nearly as well as they could before. So a couple of injuries, it starts to show. Whereas before, they didn't get injured, which is a whole nother conversation. I've got my own conspiracy theories about that. And
You coming with all the takes tonight, man.
Man, listen, man. I've been on campus so long, man. We're gonna get into it over the course of a few seasons, but I just think it's not that Saban has been bad. I agree that the talent advantage has been his biggest asset. And everything outside of that is really just been kind of hyped up because he's gotten the W's that matter. But this LSU victory, I mean, they've been coming the whole season, and we see that offense. You look at this Bama defense, and we're like, I don't know. And myself and a few other people, we did think, all right, but they've been cooking something up, right? Like they see that they're bad at linebacker. Everybody sees they can't really get a pass rush, right? But they're gonna fix this, right? 2 weeks? No, they did not, and that speaks to the lack of coaching, the lack of talent, and yeah, it's finally biting him in the butt. Finally. It took a while though.
Mike, you've been dying to jump in. Talk to me, bro.
Man, come on, man.
Chomping at the bit.
Listen, B, I love you, bro. And so
he started off with a compliment.
I can't let you walk around here spitting misinformation. So I just gotta make a side note because we're not here to talk about the NFL. There's another forum for that. But he actually wanted Drew Brees at the Dolphins, and the GM of the Dolphins actually overrode him. And that's why he didn't go there. That's one of the big reasons why he ended up. You're talking about a guy who's a control freak, and he wanted organizational control. And there's only a few coaches in the NFL that actually get that. First one that comes to mind is Bill Belichick, right? Who run the organization like they're the coach, they're the GM, they're the president, right? Saban didn't get that at the Dolphins. It turned out that was a franchise-changing decision because, statistically, Drew Brees is the greatest quarterback to ever do it, right? I think that Saban saw that, which takes me back to the point about you made about Saban as a recruiter. I think, over his years, going all the way back to when he was at LSU, before he went to the Dolphins, he's always been a great evaluator of talent. Let me just say this, right? Recruiting is a different game now than it was, 25 years ago, even in the 90s, right? Everybody's got talent. Everybody's got talent. It's just, what are you doing with that talent? And he has a process by which, that process it consistently produces NFL talent. So there's a couple ways to look at it. People used to look at the Bulls of the 90s and say, oh, well, I could have won with that talent, And I'm like, I'm not so sure you could have because, there's a lot. It's a lot more than just having talent. So I disagree to some extent about the coaching comment. I do think he's a great coach. I think he knows where his areas of expertise are and where he needs to let go and let other people take the reins, which goes back to Caesar's comment about, again, coaching attrition starting to affect what we're seeing on the field because he's been able to have this process, plug different coaches into that because they're all becoming head coaches elsewhere. right? And after 10 years, or however long he's been at Bama, it's like going 12 years now, it's finally caught up to him just a little bit, right? And when I say just a little bit, they've completely evolved on the offensive side of the ball, which is why this team is still a one-loss team to the best team in the country, right? So, Saban, listen, man, I am no lover of Saban, right? But you can't ignore what's on the tape. You can't ignore the results for the last decade plus years. He produces, and at the end of the day, I think it's a little bit unfair to say that he's not a great coach because that encompasses a lot of things, and I think he does enough of the things well to be in the conversation for a great coach. Every once in a while, he makes some questionable in-game decisions. Right?
Correct.
Yes.
Kick six.
Yep.
Every once in a while, some
kicked
questionable in-game decisions. Right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, again, what we saw was LSU had the horses. They had the coaching, and they've been doing it consistently all year. And when they ran up against a good team in Bama, not the best team ever, but they're still a great team. They still did it. They still did what they did, right? And I thought that was my takeaway from this game was, listen, these guys they're playing their game, and just like every great team that we see, year in, year out, it's not about you not knowing what they're doing. It's about them aligning their guy up against your guy and them beating you. And that's what they did to Bama on Saturday.
Yeah.
Right.
They lined up and they beat them.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So that being said, this is running a little long because B had some things on his heart. Like
I ain't mad at it, though. It's a good conversation.
right.
I got more, man. Just wait.
There's just a couple other games that were noteworthy this weekend that I'm just going to kind of glaze over. Florida put a goose egg on Vanderbilt this weekend, 56-0. Again, Trask, just a very efficient performance for him. 363, 3 TDs. They did what they had to do. Vanderbilt's not a really great team. But again, a mark of a good team is that you beat the great team. You beat the bad teams like you're supposed to beat them. Baylor, 8-0 or 9-0, just squeaked one by TCU in OT. I think they have a tough road to hoe. I don't really think that that game affects the overall picture of what we're looking at this year. Oklahoma. Quietly, this is one of my secondary teams I root for quietly because I'm a big fan of what Jalen Hurts is doing there. But again, I'm not sure that anybody in the Big 12 is a serious contender just because they're giving up 41 points to Iowa State is just not like I said, I don't think that they're really in the conversation at this point. I don't know. I have a chance to prove it. So again, my reaction to that game is just that. Hey, they're really good on offense, but they don't really do much else well. And then Georgia, Missouri. We'll hit on it later, but again, they put a goose egg on Missouri. Kelly Bryant didn't play in this game, but at the end of the day, Fromm gave an average performance. My takeaway from that is that they're beatable, and that was a weekend and a wrap. So it was a good weekend for football. We are, Auburn had a bye this week. So we were just spectators to all the madness that has happened this weekend. I think there's still a lot left to come.
Yes, indeed. All right. So that actually segues after we talked about the madness from the weekend, unless anybody had some final thoughts on the madness from the weekend.
Nothing too much, but I agree with you, Mike. I'm disappointed to see that OU isn't better because I absolutely wanted to see Jalen Hurts get a shot at a championship without the team that said you weren't good enough. I wanted him to get that chance because whether he was a Bama guy or not, I don't think you see too many people
He's easy to root for.
Yeah, he's real easy to root for. Even within the rivalry, you weren't mad at Jalen Hurts any year. It's like, man, good for him. That's all anybody really wants to say is good for him. And I want it better for him there. I thought, did they change D coordinators in the offseason?
Oklahoma did, yeah.
Oklahoma did, yeah.
and apparently it made no difference. So I mean, I'm sad for them for that reason.
They're definitely a better defense, but I just don't think that they're very deep on defense. That's the issue with Oklahoma. Like, they're schematically better, but they're just not deep enough to, once you get into a game with some teams where they're running up tempo, or they're going to have athletes that can be equivalent to yours. They're going to put up points, and you're just going to have to outscore them. And they unfortunately did not do that when they played Kansas State. So
yeah, man. Yeah, that's all. That was all my thoughts about what happened this weekend.
Ooh, all right. Well, let's start talking about how the college football playoff picture changes a little bit now. First thing I'm going to put up here on the board is we saw the rankings come out. This is not the college football playoff rankings, but this is the rankings from the coaches and AP poll. And these are the first 4 teams that are on there. LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama. Alabama dropped from 2 to 4 after their loss, which I'm gonna say this. I think that Alabama is probably one of the 4 best teams in the country. I don't think that they should be ranked number 4, though. I think that, and this is a debate that people can have all the time about whether or not it's the best teams or the most deserving teams. I don't think that if you lose, you deserve to still be in the conversation. Like, once you lose, you get removed from the conversation. Let's talk about the people who haven't lost yet. And then if they lose, then we can reintroduce that conversation again. That's how I think. Like, if I were doing the rankings, I would not have Alabama at number 4, even though I do actually think that they're one of the 4 best teams in the country, just based upon who these other people have played, what all the Alabama resume looks like, who they lost to, and how they lost that game. I don't think that they deserve to be, if the College Football Playoff Committee puts them still in at number 4, I'm going to be disappointed in that, even though I'm not going to be shocked. Any thoughts on top 4 from you guys?
I'm very interested to hear what B has to say about this.
I'm waiting on you, man. Come on.
Before you two,
I need to hear if you're gonna say some more baloney that I gotta say.
before you two,
slid it in the middle so it don't dome up. Baloney, whatever, man. Baloney's good. Let's go.
Listen, before you two get into it, let me get my take out of the way, and then y'all two can square up with each other.
Please.
I'm with you, Ike, but you know what? These rankings are, what's so funny about college football in November is that a lot of melee happens.
Yeah, for sure.
And we've seen it in previous years to where you'll have teams is looking like the picture looks crystal clear, and then all of a sudden chaos breaks, right? Bama still has to go on the road to Auburn. Clemson pretty much is going to moonwalk into the playoff picture, aside some type of massive breakdown on their part. OSU has Penn State and Minnesota up, so we could be looking at definitely a different picture in the next few weeks. So yeah. I'm fine with Bama being number 4 because we all know that once people begin to prove themselves, like if let's say Minnesota wins out, they're got to be in that number 4 somewhere. Yep. So you have a lot of teams
that would argue that that's not true, though. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well,
I think Mike might be one of those people who would argue
if Minnesota wins out, they're not in the top 4.
I think they should be in the top 4 today, based upon who they beat. They beat Penn State was ranked in the top 4. Now, I'm not saying Penn State is the best team in the country. Penn State was one of the teams that, as the College Football Playoff Committee had said, they were one of the teams. If the season ended on week 10, Penn State would have been playing for the College Football Playoff in that scenario. Minnesota beat them.
My thing is winning cures all. And as long as you keep winning, it'll work itself. It should work yourself out unless you're Baylor.
I don't disagree.
I think Baylor's true. Okay, let's be clear on that. But if you're Minnesota, you pretty much control your destiny. Now, do they beat Ohio State? I don't know if they do, but like to Mike's point, we don't know what Ohio State has because they've had an easy slate. So,
before we get into this, because I know Mike has a lot he wants to say, I want you guys to dovetail your comments with this. All right, looking at these 4 teams right now, who of these 4 teams do you most expect to not be in the Final Four at the end of the season? I'm going to start with B. Will.
Alabama.
You expect Alabama to not be in the Final Four once it's all said and done?
Correct.
Okay, so you still think LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, some other team. We'll talk about who that team is in a minute, but you think Alabama has – why do you say Alabama?
Alabama number one because they have to play with a very paper-thin quarterback, has to go and play the fiercest defensive line they would have played all season at home, where a freshman quarterback plays the best he plays. So they've got to play that game. They had one difficult game and they lost it. They lost it way worse than the score actually shows. It was not that close, but they were not impressive on the defensive side, and they weren't impressive on the offensive side, be it injuries or drop passes, which they some front runners, and that's another story. But so I haven't been convinced by anything they've done on the field that they are the number 4 team. Mm-hmm. They do not have the inside track to the SEC championship game because LSU doesn't have anybody else who can beat them on their schedule. The best Alabama could hope for is that LSU loses to Georgia. And even in that case, they would at best be the 3rd best team in the conference. And that should not be good enough to get you into the college playoff. If that's good enough to get you in the college football playoff, we got to start. We got to do what they did in Bolivia to these committee members, man. We got to get something going because that's nonsense.
So LSU only has Ole Miss, Arkansas, and Texas A&M left on their schedule.
Gift wrapped.
And then they would play as it stands right now, Georgia in the SEC championship. So you're saying that they cakewalk through the rest of those teams, which I don't disagree with. And then the only chance is that Bama would have of getting in is LSU losing to Georgia.
Yes.
All right, Mike, who of the 4 teams that were up there do you most expect to not be there at the end of the year? Or you could say, hey, I don't expect any of them. They're going to all be there.
I think that if I got to pick one, I'm picking Alabama, but I'm not doing that with any conviction. And here's why, right? This committee has already shown us that they don't have to win the West to get in because they did it and then they won the championship when they didn't do it, right? They closed their year losing to us, missing the SEC championship game, and then, winning a championship on Tua's arm against Georgia. So I would have to say Alabama. Like I said, I can't put a whole lot of conviction behind that at this point. I just don't think that they're a lock to beat us. Like to B's point, because that game is at Auburn, I think Auburn has a chance. So based on kind of like the comparative transitive property of we played this person who you played and whatnot. It's held true this year. We played LSU a lot tougher because they played LSU on defense. And so if you are telling me that same Alabama offense is going to come into our house and put 40, 41, I just don't think so because LSU couldn't do it at their place. The Valley is a tough place to play as any. So if our defense can hold their offense 23 points, I think we can hold Alabama, to 23 points. And, if we hold anybody at 20, 23 points, I believe that Auburn has a shot in that game. So Alabama, I think of the 3 teams on that list, 4 teams on that list is the most likely to end up with a second loss, which is why I put them out of the conversation. I actually see, Clemson's not losing. I'm just gonna put it. I'm just gonna put it to you straight. Like Clemson is going because the ACC is all-time weak this year. Ohio State, I'm just not sure that we know what's going on in the Big Ten right now. But right now, all we know about Ohio State is that they win every game the way they're expected to win it. So I'm not gonna punt. You have to play who's on the schedule. To some extent, it's not their fault that, some of the people they play aren't that great, but they're certainly beating them like they're not that great. So, even Clemson, again, laid an egg against North Carolina, almost lost that if not for a failed 2-point conversion by Mac Brown. So, I have to think, I'm giving Ohio State credit for winning games the way they're supposed to win it. And then LSU. I foresee multiple scenarios where LSU loses the SEC championship and still gets into that playoff.
Yep,
Right?
I agree.
mean, if you believe they're a top 4 team now, right? When they get to that SEC championship game, they're playing Florida or Georgia, right? Who may still be ranking the top 10. And if that's a close game, you know, I think that, you know, we might actually see something. You know, I'm gonna go out and make a bold prediction here. You know, if let's say if we beat Georgia and, you know, by some crazy happenstance, Florida makes that SEC championship and beats LSU, I'm not sure that you jump Florida into the top 4, but I'm not sure that LSU falls out. I just don't. I think that this could be the year that we actually see the SEC champ doesn't make it, but the SEC runner-up makes it in. And
If LSU
I think
loses,
this,
yeah,
right, correct. Yeah, I think that this, of all the years that we could see absolute chaos in this playoff, this is the year. Now, do I think LSU is going to lose? I don't. I just think that they have won every game decisively this year. It's very hard to beat the same team twice, though, which is why I would give LSU, you know, slightly worse odds against Florida than I would if they have to play Georgia in the SEC championship game. You know, I think it's very hard to beat the same team twice in one season. I think the team that loses that game actually has the advantage. The winner kind of gets lulled into a false sense of we can do what we did last time and beat you. I think that, you know, Florida has, you know, good coaching, and I think they'll adjust. And if they don't win the game, they at least make it close. But in the scenario where LSU wins the SEC championship and Bama wins out, I still think, you know, it's going to be real hard. I mean, what one-loss team do you jump over Bama at this point? You know, if Clemson is undefeated,
but that's assuming
Ohio
that
State
that
is
all the rest of the
undefeated.
teams are one loss.
That's correct. But again, I don't think Minnesota gets in. I don't think that Minnesota gets in over a one-loss Bama.
Oh,
Well, I mean,
if they beat Ohio State.
So that's going to be the scenario, right? So like Minnesota is undefeated, and they would had to beat Ohio State to go undefeated.
That's
They're
true.
already
That's
seven,
true.
right?
But in
They're
that
already
scenario, Ohio State falls out.
Correct. That's what I'm
Sure.
saying. Like,
Right.
so like
Right.
the one-loss team would be Ohio State in that scenario.
Yeah, you're
So,
not
like-
getting two Big Ten schools. You're not getting two Big Ten schools in the playoff.
But
It's an elimination.
the only other undefeated team that's got a shot to get in, which I say a shot, and it's a very outside shot, is Baylor. Right? Baylor could run the table in the Big 12 and possibly, but that would be, I don't know. Like number one, I don't think they're going to do it.
Not without a lot of chaos. Not without a lot of chaos in front of them.
Yeah,
Right,
they
I
got-
actually think they can
they're
run
in the same.
table
They'll
and
be
not
in the
even
same
considered.
position. They'll be in the same position as a one-loss Bama. Baylor, if they go undefeated, they have to hope that everyone ahead of them loses.
Yeah. But, all right, Caesar, give me your team that you think is not going to make the Final Four that's there now.
I would say Bama, just because of the four teams, they're the only ones who don't control their destiny, right?
Mhm.
LSU pretty much, a lot of their tough games are behind them.
All of their
except
tough
for the
games, not a lot.
SEC. Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking about the SEC championship, right?
Yeah.
But for the most part, their regular season games, their tough games are behind.
Yeah.
Ohio State still has Penn State, and then they have the conference championship. And like Mike said, Clemson, we might as well. They've already punched their ticket as far as I'm concerned to the playoffs, barring some
Pennsylvania.
meltdown of epic proportions, right? So I would say the only team that leaves Bama, and they're pretty much on the outside looking in, hoping for chaos, which could happen. But as it stands today, they can't do anything to change the narrative because they had their shot and they lost it to LSU.
All right,
So-
I'm about to say something that you all will probably stone me for. All right, and I'm going to attempt to back up this statement. All right, Ohio State loses to either Penn State or Michigan and does not make the college football playoff.
What you smoking over there?
I'm gonna stone you for that one.
I'm not gonna stone you for that.
I'm-
It's
What you
possible.
smoking over
I'm
there?
not
What you
stone you for
smoking
that.
over there?
I think Michigan can do it.
Ohio
Michigan
State
can do it.
has not
You think,
played.
so you think
a
Michigan would be the
defense.
team?
Either Penn State or Michigan. I just think both of them
Have you watched Michigan? Have any of y'all watched Michigan?
Yes, I actually have. That's why I'm saying this. Michigan's defense is actually really good. Their offense has been sputtering.
It's putrid. Their offense is putrid.
The last 2 weeks they played way better.
Who have they played the last 2 weeks?
Where is that game, by the way?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. The Michigan-Ohio State right? is in Michigan, yes. I think they got a shot. I think Penn State has a better chance, but I think that Ohio State loses one of those games and does not make the college football playoff.
If I had money to bet right now, and you told me pick one of the top 8 teams right now to win the championship, I would bet Ohio State. Because talent-wise, they are heads and tails above everybody else that they are going to play. They're still heads and tails. They're the top of the Big Ten. So I expect them to win out. Number one, because they have better talent than everybody they're going to play. But number two, I haven't seen that lazy game from OSU that I usually see every year. Like Purdue last year, they lost to Purdue. And Purdue they were riled up and they were at Purdue and they had like the sick kid and the team was doing it for the sick kid. We played Purdue in a bowl game. Purdue looked like they didn't even belong on the field with us. Ohio State has more, by quantitative measures, more talent than us. How do you lose that game to Purdue when you have guys at every position that are bigger, stronger, faster? Ohio State has a game like that per year. They have not had anything close to that type of underachievement in a game this year. I think
name a team that they've played that has even a respectable defense. Respectable, not even good.
They have none. Listen, I am not telling you that they have played quality competition, but as everybody here has said and agreed with, when you play a bad team, you need to stomp them. Like you need to look like you are heads and shoulders above them, and Ohio State has done that. So Clemson.
Let me give you the example that I want to give as to if they play menial talent, they look human.
Okay.
The Michigan State game. Michigan State has you think Michigan's offense is terrible. Go watch a Michigan State game, right?
Oh, for sure.
Their offense is, I would say Michigan State's offense is worse than ours, and that's a huge statement. They have a terrible offense. Ohio State only put up 34 on them, right? Now, I'm saying only 34 relative to what they're putting up on every other team. Michigan State has much better defense. They look human. You put them up against a team that can actually score a little bit, a Penn State. And again, we can argue about whether or not Michigan's offense is starting to rebound or not. You put them up against a team that can score a little bit and has a good defense. I think that Ohio State, and they're playing those guys back-to-back weeks. So they're playing a really good defense with a decent offense and a really good defense back-to-back weeks. I think they lose one of those games.
Based on your logic, Alabama should be undefeated.
What do you mean should be?
Based on your logic, because you're talking about talent, right? And you're talking about that they've beaten people considerably that they should be. That's basically Bama's season so far up until LSU.
No, but as we've all pointed to, Arkansas is an absolutely dreadful team. And listen, I know you're going to play some twos once you get up really big against a bad opponent.
They beat them 48-7.
There's no way. There's no.
Ole Miss, that's the game you're thinking about.
Ole Miss?
I'm sorry.
Ole Miss?
I'm sorry. Ole Miss, yeah.
They still beat them by 4 scores.
How many scores
they did give up 30,
you let them get? Like that's like you don't. We gave up 14 points to Ole Miss. 14 points to Ole Miss in a game where we were BSing on offense the whole game. All right. So if you're gonna give a opponent the ball that many times and still only give up 14 points with 2 NFL players on the sideline, that lets me know even though we weren't serious, at least our defense is legit. I don't think Nick Saban ever coaches, and y'all can correct me on this. Hey, listen, let's just go out there and not get hurt, put some backups in. We'll make it through this game. We just got to preserve you guys for the next week. Nick Saban doesn't do that, at least from what I understand of him as a coach and the years he's been through and what players and other coaches say about him. He coaches these guys really hard week in and week out, whether it's the backups or the ones. So you give up that many points against a guy who can't complete a 5-yard out at Ole Miss, something's up, man. They are not the team, and we can say, yeah, they're getting W's. We kind of have to draw who they are from all these beatdowns they give out because they played nobody. So this is a very inexact science. But I have not been impressed by them. There are years where they've looked otherworldly against terrible teams, and then there are years where they look very beatable. And this is just one of those years where they haven't proven anything. Even the eye test, the offense looks great, but Tua is hurt now. So even that's questionable. I don't see where the idea that they are just they haven't looked as good as Ohio State's looked to me. And maybe y'all see something not done, but
I agree. I definitely agree that Ohio State looks better than Alabama. My point is that I just think that they are going to lose one of those games because they haven't actually had to play football for 11 weeks, basically. At that point.
So can we just go ahead and just get this out here? The best team doesn't always win the game, obviously, right?
For sure.
Michigan gave Notre Dame the business, and Notre Dame is close to beating Georgia in their own house, right? So if we just need to stop pretending like the talent gap between Michigan and Ohio State is so great. It's not. I'm just telling you.
And that's my point. It's like they've looked much better, much improved since that loss that they took offensively, and they've always had a good defense.
Yeah, they had to figure some things out. They played Penn State tough, and they lost a 7-point game, right? They ran Notre Dame off the field. Now, listen, I'm a little bit of a Notre Dame hater. Like I just thought they were fake news when the season started, right? But
agreed.
At the end of the day, like I said, I mean, to believe what B is saying, I have to believe that Georgia is considerably less than I thought they were, and I'm not sure I believe that, right? So, I believe that Georgia is beatable because we saw them get beat. But, I also thought, they were figuring some things out. So I'm going to go ahead and give y'all a hot take for the season, right? Ohio State misses the playoff because they lose to Michigan. And I'm going to call the score of that game 28-21 Michigan.
Again, you're not going to get a disagreement with me because that's exact. I literally just told you I think they lose one of those games.
Ohio State, to your point, has looked impressive, but as far as I'm concerned, their season starts this week up against Penn State, followed by Michigan. We don't know a lot about Ohio State.
They play Miami of Ohio. No, wait a minute. Their next game is, hold on, let's back up. Rutgers next. They play Rutgers and
then Penn State.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're gonna blow out Rutgers.
So in the next 3 weeks, we'll know everything we need to know about Ohio State.
Right. Okay. Listen. I'm saying it now because I just want it to be remembered. I just want my name to be remembered throughout the ages, right? So we'll give you all this right now.
Again, right? I'm not going to disagree with you because that was my take from the beginning. I think Ohio State misses the college football playoff. They're going to lose to either Penn State or Michigan.
There's something to be said for a team that has to face some sort of adversity during the season, right? And we saw LSU run up against it, and then we saw how they handled it, right? And I'm telling you what happens sometimes when you haven't had that all season because you've been running everybody off the field. And then maybe not the better team, but the team with the horses to at least hang with you. And you get punched in the mouth on the road, right? It's a rivalry. And, Michigan hasn't won one in forever, right? Just like LSU hadn't beat Bama at Bama since, 2011 or something crazy like that. I just think there's something you can't just discount them and say, because they ran over all these people, they're gonna run over Michigan. I think that would be the biggest mistake. I hope they don't go in with that mentality. Michigan might run them off the field if they do. But Justin Fields, I like Justin Fields. I think that he's a great quarterback. He crisp throws, he hits receivers in strides, he can make plays with his feet. He's got good pocket presence. I think he's really well coached. I love what their head coach is doing with the talent up there. I think he's clearly developing. But I think that this path has been a little bit too perfect for Ohio State. And, as I said earlier, I think that, we're going to see a lot of chaos this year. And I think that that's part of it. So I'm just going to leave that right there. Y'all can just chew on that for a minute.
All right, I'm gonna give you last word on this right here, B. Will. Go ahead and unless you say something absolutely ridiculous, then I'm gonna have to let somebody regret it. But go ahead.
I just want to summarize here. It sounds like we're all saying, or most y'all are saying, if they haven't played anybody, then I'm not convinced. But, and I would agree with you. All you have to draw on then is A, what we know of your personnel, B, what we know of your coach's track record to bring players to playing their best at the right time of the season, or C, whatever we can glean from these overmatched matchups that these teams have against lesser opponents. And
Okay.
in the scope of all those things, I still like Ohio State the best. Number one there, I think if who's the dude that got suspended? Is it Chase Young?
Mhm.
Okay. If he gets suspended for 4 games, I think they have the talent to win out. Like, do we all agree Ohio State winning out would not be a surprise?
Correct. I would not be shocked. No.
Okay. So if they win out and win the Big Ten, they're going to get this dude back. Let's assume he wants to come back because there may be some NFL stuff in play where he says, no, I'm good. Don't worry about it. But from what he's talked over the course of the entire year, from what that team has been talking about, they felt some pressure from last year, the last 2 years of losing that game they shouldn't have lost, of missing out on the playoff, of kind of hearing it that they were overrated. And I think each team can have its own motivation. I mean, Ryan Day was there on those teams that underachieved. He was there under Urban Meyer, who all the players and him said, well, Urban's a little old school and he coached this way. Coach Day got in here and he just changed it up. And now we're a little more loose. We're a little more free. I think it's a different team because it's a different coach, because they have a different quarterback. And honestly, I wasn't sold on JT Barrett or Haskins, to be fair. But I think it's a different team. And we can't just say, if you've been beaten up on nobodies, then you can't be as good as you look. I think we have to consider the possibility that, yes, they've been beating up on nobodies, and they might just be as good as they've looked beating up on nobodies.
So that's not my argument that they're not as good as they look. I'm just arguing they haven't played I'm just arguing they haven't played a defense that's that good. And so if it's in a situation where manufacturing points is not easy, I want to see how they adjust to adversity. They haven't seen adversity yet. I'm not saying that they're not good. Good teams can crack under adversity. Like, it's the great teams. I'm saying that they're not. They haven't proven to me greatness yet because they haven't played nobody.
They haven't had a chance.
Yeah, right. But all I'm saying that is agreement is boring, and your logic is sound, but you're wrong, and I'm right. And when Michigan plays Ohio State, we're all gonna see it. And I will accept one Popeye's chicken sandwich as penance if you can get one without getting stabbed.
So I will Venmo you that $6.99 plus tax in whatever jurisdiction you live in right now. I will absolutely do that.
You gotta call the Uber Eats guy. You gotta have him deliver it for me. That's all I accept.
You don't want that, man. They be eating people food, man. You don't want that. I don't believe that.
Yeah, just don't order fries, B. You good if you don't order the fries.
Yeah, right.
What if they be breathing all on your food, man? I don't know. They look in the bag and check and make sure if it's right.
So wait a minute, like, so you got an issue with Uber Eats, but have you ever ordered a pizza? Like, you acting like food delivery is like this novel concept that Uber Eats.
Okay, I have ordered a pizza delivery. I have ordered a pizza delivery like 4 times in my whole life for just that reason. I don't trust it, man. My food in somebody else's car? Nah, man. I don't know what your car. You might got mold in your car. I don't know.
All right, we're gonna move on. All right, we're gonna move on to the SEC. We're gonna bring it back home. All right, so we're gonna premiere our first power rankings in the SEC. We're gonna go from the worst to first.
Yeah,
I'm gonna let my man Caesar talk about this one for a minute. Caesar,
all right,
from the bottom of the league, who do we got?
Starter from the bottom, and they're still there. At number 14, we got Archie. Pretty much, you could put Vanderbilt here as well.
The Chad Morris list, Archie.
Yeah. 2-8 on the year. And listen, anytime you get ran off the field by a Conference USA school, you belong in the bottom of our conference.
Well, they're the first to fire their coach in season, so I agree. Definitely
right.
Bottom of the barrel.
So it's not a good look for them. Number 13 is Vandy. They're also only have 2 wins. The only reason I put them ahead of Arkansas is that they do have an impressive win, which is over Missouri, the Kelly Bryant-less Missouri Tigers. But it's a win nonetheless because it's Vandy and they'll take it any way they can get it.
Yo, I am
Uh,
shocked Vanderbilt still has the same head coach. I'm gonna just be honest with you. I thought that guy was gone after last year, and he's still
He's,
holding on.
I've heard
wait
he's a
for it.
great guy.
Wait for it. Um, so that brings me to number 12 and South Carolina, man. South Carolina,
Yo, they
because
just lost to freaking App State, dude.
They
just
did.
when I thought
It
Muschamp had
was
his job,
ugly.
yeah, Muschamp had his job, I thought saved. I thought he bought himself another year when he beat Georgia.
Yeah,
And then came App State. Their next 2 games are on the road at A&M and at home against Clemson. They're staring at a 4-8 year. I don't know if that's going to keep Muschamp around. But yeah, this has not been the year that they had panned out, especially after they had.
Muschamp can't get it together as a head coach, man.
No, I just think he's a coordinator. I think he's just a coordinator. Sooner he can realize that, the better. Number 11 is Kentucky. Now, what's interesting about these schools here from 11 up, these are schools who have an opportunity to they have an opportunity to at least be bowl eligible. And Kentucky is one of those teams. They're 4-5 right now. They have a layup of a game, and I think they play Vandy at the end of the year. So that's my team. They've underperformed because they lost a lot last year. So for them to be bowl eligible at the end of the year is a good look for them. Coming in at number 10 is Mississippi State, and they have taken some big time beatings. But at the same time, they've lost. They pretty much have lost to teams that they were supposed to lose, right? And so this is another team who, at the end of the year, they play Ole Miss. They can actually beat Ole Miss and become bowl eligible, given how much they've struggled throughout the year. Which brings me to number 9, Ole Miss. What's interesting about this team, Ole Miss, is that while they have not been good, outside of the opening season loss to Memphis, who is ranked, by the way, this team has pretty much lost to everyone they should have lost. And
Yeah,
outside of being throttled by Bama, they pretty much have played everybody close. I know we were upset about the
that's
fact that we kept them
sad.
close, but they've been in a lot of the games they've lost, even though we know they probably shouldn't have. And so there's something has to be said for that. And like Mississippi State, they have an opportunity to be bowl eligible then. So coming in at 9 is Ole Miss. Number 8 is Tennessee, the Vols. So they are currently 5-5 on the year, and they have an opportunity to finish the year with 7 wins. Now, I think they may lose if Kelly Bryant comes back next week. I think they play them next week. I'm not sure. When you guys may look that up and see, but they play Missouri, and if Kelly Bryant comes back, that's going to be a tough win for them. So I see them being bowl eligible. That's probably not what people at Rocky Top would like or projected to see, but considering how they started the year, Tennessee has improved and gotten better, and so I think that's somewhat of a positive going into next year. We'll just see how they finish it out. Number 7 is Missouri. Missouri has, for the most part, have had a good season. That where Kelly Bryant goes, that's where Missouri goes. We know they have a good defense, but they've dropped games they probably shouldn't have dropped just because they didn't have their guy. He comes back in enough time, they have an opportunity to finish the year 7-5. That brings me to number 6, the Aggies. This is a talented group. Jimbo's been recruiting well for them, and they're currently 6-3 with losses to teams that are understandable. Us being one, Clemson and Bama, but they have a tough road to close out the season. I mean, like us, they have one of the toughest schedules in the nation, and they finished the year playing Georgia and LSU. So it's it's going to be a tough road for them. They're looking at a 7-5 year, but who knows? They can make it interesting against Georgia, LSU. I don't think they pull them out, but they make them. Which brings me to number 5, and that's my beloved Tigers. We should be higher. We've mentioned our frustrations with that, and I think Auburn has an opportunity to rise in the rankings, starting with Georgia this upcoming weekend, which we'll preview in a moment. But that brings us to the next 4 schools. The next 4 schools, I either hate you or I'm bitter because you beat us this year. So that brings us to number 4, Florida, which I call the Swamp Lizards. And so they're a 2-loss team and are actually still have an outside chance of making it to the SEC championship, unlike us. So with the right breaks, I'm pretty sure they'll be pulling for us this upcoming weekend to get that opportunity. But we'll see. Their defense has been good. Mike mentioned them. They look pretty solid against Vandy, which isn't hard to do. But they did what they're supposed to do. They've been playing fairly well. So number 4 is Florida. Number 3 is the Georgia Leg Humpers. They're getting better. The jury is still out on them offensively. I think with our defense, we're going to make some things very difficult for Fromm. I'm surprised that they have not been able to run the ball like they've been able to in the past few years. That's been something interesting to see. But their defense is good, and their defense has been keeping them in most of the games that they've been playing. So also, they control their destiny. So number 3 is Georgia. The Updikes. They're number 2. They had an opportunity to be number 1 had they won their game, but I'm gonna put them at number 2. They're trending downward as far as I'm concerned because they have us on the road to close out the season, and that could push them down the rankings. But for right now, I got them at number 2, and at number 1, I got the LSU Fighting Orgeron. LSU look good, man. They look good. They look like a team of destiny, and I don't see much getting in the way into the playoffs. So those are my power rankings as of this week.
Cool. Anybody have any disagreements with that order? Anything they'd like to add to that?
I agree. From 14 to 6, I think not a whole lot of people argue that. I mean, I may argue that there's some swapping that can happen there with Tennessee. The East is kind of weak at the bottom, so while they're winning games now, and they don't look as terrible as we thought they were, I just think there are a lot of interchangeable pieces down there in the lower half of the SEC. So moving up, Auburn's right where they should be. We haven't proven that we're better than any of the 4 teams that you got ranked ahead of us because we lost to 2 of them. We still have to play the other 2, so we'll see. They'll have a chance to prove whether they're higher or not. LSU undisputed number 1. I think you keep Bama at 2 right now, but a lot of the rest of it will just kind of sort itself out over the next few weeks. So those rankings are spot on.
Yeah, be Will.
No disagreement, man. I mean, it sounds good to me.
All right, cool. Well, let's get to the last little segment. I know, B. Will, you got to go here in just a minute, so I'm gonna let you kick off and talk about the Georgia preview, and then if you have to leave, then that's cool. We'll finish it off.
I'll stay around however long I need to argue with Mike, so it's cool. We're looking forward to Georgia this weekend. Battle between the hedges. We have a matchup between 2 teams who are stout on defense, 2 of the better teams in the conference on defense. 2 offenses who are sputtering, who at the beginning of the year, I don't think anybody would have expected either one of these offenses to be as underwhelming as they have been. So predictions, expectations, seeing what we saw on Saturday from Georgia, which has kind of been a recurring theme for them, which is Fromm looking mediocre. Their running game not quite being what we would have expected it to be, and their receivers looking a little out of kilter and not being on the same page as from. So I guess let's start at the top. Me, Ike, what you feeling about this game?
I actually, I'm, cautiously optimistic for Auburn's ability to, in this game, hold the Georgia team in check. And that's really going to be our only prayer. I just don't feel like our offense is going to wake up enough to make any sort of significant strides against a very good Georgia defense. Like every time we've played a defense, Florida was a great defense. This is the thing that frustrates me so much. When we play great defenses, we don't look terrible because of talent. We look terrible because of scheme and just poor execution. So I don't expect us to look overmatched with Georgia's defense. I expect us to just be as mediocre as we normally would, not move the ball very much, and just pray that our defense can come up with some big plays. I expect it to be a low scoring game, but I don't know. I want to pick us just because I want to, love my team, but I just don't feel like our offense is there, and I can't put a bunch of stock in it right now. But we'll see. We'll see.
All right, Mike, what you say?
Against us in this game is hard. Echoing what Isaac just said. The new era of college football is that you have to score and score a lot to win. The idea of these kind of low scoring, grinded out games, I think, is kind of dying. The way the rules have changed are lending themselves, to make offense a little easier, and somehow we're making it harder. So, what I think is, without making a prediction on the outcome, is, I'm going to make some statements about if this happens, then this will happen. Listen, if Bo Nix throws for 250 and 2 TDs, Auburn wins.
How many turnovers does he have though with those 2 touchdowns? Does he have to be error free?
Zero turnovers. Okay. No turnovers. And because if he turns the ball over, I'm telling you, it's going to come at the most critical time.
Right.
And the reason I say that is because we're not currently generating enough offense for any time for a turnover to not be critical. Right. So, 250 and 2 TDs are not great stats. Those are game manager stats. And that's really all we need from him. He needs to make enough throws, to create some space, for our running backs to control the ball and keep the defense off the field. And those are really kind of generic football statements I'm making, but really, that is what's been defined our season to this point, even in the wins, is that for an Ole Miss team that we should have run off the field, right? We played championship level defense versus them. But we had a game where our defense played nearly 100 snaps because we moved the ball so poorly. And you're not going to leave the defense on the field for nearly 100 snaps versus Georgia and win that game. I don't care if it's on the road, at your mom's house, in your backyard. Like, you're going to lose that against them. So if we can move the ball at an average pace, Auburn wins. And I think that we win that by a couple touchdowns. I think we win that by 14 or more. If we can't do that, Auburn loses another close one. That's how good I think this defense is. And, if we put up a similar type offensive effort that we have in the other losses, we're going to lose those games. We're going to lose this game even if it's at home. I don't think that the home crowd, I know everybody keeps saying the Bo Nix is playing better at home. I just don't think the home crowd gives us much of a advantage with this particular quarterback or with this coach against this team. So Bo Nix has an average game. Auburn wins by 2 touchdowns. If he plays like he has been versus all the other top 10 teams we played this year, which he has an average quarterback rating of 29, we lose a close one, because our defense has shown us consistently throughout the year we have a big enough sample size to know our defense is going to keep us in it. And I haven't seen anything from or the Georgia offense that suggests that they are somehow going to grow by leaps and bounds versus our defense when Joe Burrow wasn't able to do it. So in his own house at that. So that's where I'm kind of at with the game for this weekend. I'm hopeful that they'll figure some things out. I'll make another statement and then I'll pass it to Caesar. If we can get the ball in the hands of Anthony Schwartz at least 6 to 8 times, we likely win this game as well too. I think that Schwartz is. I think that he's the game breaker. I think that he is, kind of like our hidden key to success. He's been completely underutilized this year, but what we have seen is that when they're able to get the ball to him, it's because they're hitting on all cylinders. And he's having a great game. In the games where he has not had a great game, we have not gotten the ball to Schwartz at all. It seems like they just can't find a way to get him the ball when Bo's not playing well. So, Schwartz has a good game. Bo has a good game. Auburn wins. Those two things don't happen when we lose a tight one, probably by 3 to 6 points.
Yeah. All right, Caesar, what do you say?
A couple of things I want to see in this game. One of the things that, not to beat the dead horse, but one of the things that has frustrated me with this offensive coaching staff is we've seen it all the time in these big games. The offense will come out first drive, second drive, and look amazing, right? They'll get a touchdown or they get a field goal. They'll move the ball, and the opposing team makes their adjustments, and Auburn never adjusts offensively the rest of the game, right? And then it becomes a defensive struggle, and then our defense just gets worn down. I am wanting to see what kind of adjustments the coaching staff makes to put our offensive players in a position to make plays. To Mike's point about Schwartz, getting him his touches, getting some comfortable, makeable throws for nits instead of putting him in third, second, and long, right? Another thing that has to be shored up, and I'm not sure if we get it fixed, is special teams. A big problem we had against Ole Miss was our special teams wasn't good. We had a poor job of covering a punt return that led to an Ole Miss score that pretty much put them in the game down to the end. And then we had missed field goals left and right. Our kicker, he has a good leg, but he's not accurate. So in a game like this against Georgia, if our offense struggles, for us to have a shot at winning, we have to play very well in other phases of the game. And I dare say it'll be pivotal if we could force a score in one of the other phases of the game. That will help the offense out by leaps and bounds. Because if it comes down to going mano-a-mano, our offense against their offense, I know Georgia has not been Georgia of late. I don't like our chances, given what we've seen so far this year. So special teams has to figure something out. Defense has to keep doing what they've been doing, playing motivated, inspired, with grit. If they don't in those other phases, it's a rap scheme for us. Because I don't want it to come down to us having to try to outscore them.
I feel it.
Well, I think I agree with a little bit of everything that y'all just said, because I mean, at one point, I think we all had hope that Bo's struggles was a simple difference between being at home and being away, but you came back for Ole Miss and you realize, no, that's not really it. He's just struggling to make some throws that he should make. So for that reason, I don't have the confidence I had earlier in the season that we absolutely would win the home games because of our defense. So I'm with y'all on that, but at the same time, I'm encouraged because Georgia had like 3 offensive linemen hurt in the last game, including 2 centers. So there's going to be some inexperience up there. That can, with our D line, that can definitely turn into some turnovers. So
if we can get a couple holding calls.
Right. I mean, hey, even if we don't, when your center can't, don't know what's coming, and we pull a stunt and he's clueless because he hadn't been on the field, I mean, it's going to be lunchtime for our defensive line. Now, whether that turns into a win, I don't know, but I think it's the right time for us to pull this win. If I was betting, I would say that we win because, I mean, I've been wrong before, so who cares? We we look mediocre on offense. They look mediocre, but they played, and we're on a bye, so that definitely gives us the time. We're gonna be fresher. We're gonna have this little home stretch of rah rah for the seniors. Which, I mean, these defensive guys, they want to make a very memorable stand the last few games here, and I think that they're going to be motivated. But the defense was never really in question for any of us, so it's all about the offense execution and getting some offense going past those first 2 or 3 scripted drives where we come up with something and we look great, and then they say, "Oh, that's it. Okay, we got it," and then we don't do anything for the rest of the game. But I would pick us simply on a motivational standpoint. Georgia has to be at least a little worn down physically. I mean, we know they are because they've been getting hurt. And I think that that plays an important part in this game because I don't think they've had a bye since before they played Florida, right? Is that right? Right. So they're on a little bit of a stretch here, the same way we were on a little bit of a stretch going into the Florida game. 6 games straight, and now we're on the road. Now here they are, at least 2 tough games in this past stretch, and now they're on the road. So I expect us to win a very close game, even if Bo does stink it up a little bit, because I think that they are equally as smelly on offense. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I listen. I'm cautiously optimistic about our chances in this game. I think it helps that we're at home. But to everybody's point, Bo Nix has got to play better. We've got to have more. My thing is, and we've said this already, we just have to have more sustained drives. And Gus has got to make sure that he's caught in those crucial times is where it hurts my feelings so much of the play calling. Like when we're in those 3rd and shorts, or we're in those situations where we've got to pick up a first down, the play calling has just been atrocious in those situations. And if we can call the right plays to get us in a good position, to put Bo Nix in a position where he can be successful, and we can avoid the penalties. That's another big thing that killed us against Ole Miss, is just timely penalties. If we can avoid those penalties, I think we'll be in a good position to be able to win this game. But that's a lot of ifs, and that's why I hesitate to pick us.
Agreed. 100%.
All right. Any final words from anybody before we sign off for the night?
Field position is going to be important in this game.
Yeah, I agree.
What I don't want to see is Bo Nix starting at his own 15. Like, that's not, even at home, it's something about having a shorter field mentally into a quarterback, a young QB psyche. It kind of helps them versus having to go the length of the field. So the less of those we have, I like our chances in the game. So,
yeah, I think B. Will's phone cut out on it. But Mike, you got any final words?
Hey, yeah, I just did on what Caesar said. Like I said, I mean, the coaches are going to have to help this quarterback out and put him in some good positions, give him some easy throws, some get the ball out of his hands quickly. And then he's just got to make the throws. He's got to make the easy ones. I mean, the hard ones are hard for a reason. You can't make the easy ones hard. So, at the end of the day, he can, hit some quick outs, some quick slants, and just take what the defense is giving them. I like our chances.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, that's all we have for tonight. I appreciate everybody for tuning in with us. Once again, you can follow the team here on all social media, the War Rapport. We will be continuing to give you guys some really great content, and we will be back live with you all this Saturday when we are taking on Georgia at home. And hopefully we have a good showing and we don't come back on to the stream being too frustrated after the end of that game.
One more thing, gentlemen.
Yes, sir.
War Eagle.
War Eagle.
Peace.